Hey guys, welcome back to another Tech Tip Tuesday. Today, we're going to teach you how to tune a boost controller to lower your 60-foot time. Hey guys, Doug here from Motion Raceworks. We've gotten our Nova back out and running, and just being at the track those few times that we've been at the track and then the other times earlier this year, we just get a ton of questions actually about setting up boost control to make your car go down the track. And when I will pop in to help somebody out if they're having an issue or if they ask me for help, first thing I do is just kind of see how they have things set up. And it kind of occurred to me that there's real no standard, and I feel like there's a lot of question on things. Just like anything else, there's 100 different ways you can do something, but from a simplified point of view, what's the easiest way and what's the best way to go from having no boost control setup or no configuration to having a good running car. You know, with turbo cars, they make so much power that I see a lot of people completely ignoring the first 60 foot or the first 100, 300 feet. And I'm just here to tell you, you can have a really fast, very consistent, really deadly car as far as your competitors are concerned if you work on that front half. You know, us turbo guys are made fun of for not caring about that because we have all the power in the world to go out the back end. But if you compare a solid front half with a solid back half, it's really easy. You know, you can really go fast really quick. And then once you get that front half done, it's really easy to pour the coals to the back end. So today I want to just show you how to set up a boost versus time boost control graph from square one. If you've never had one, this is the same methodology that I used on my Nova. We basically started with a whole new ECU. We started with everything new this year, and you know, I didn't even have a boost graph set up before I went to the track the first day. I spent 5 minutes on it, and that is all it took to start a solid base. Our first pass off the trailer was really easy. It was like a 1.3 60 foot, but then since then it's been a progression from a 1.3 all the way down to a 1.20 60 foot. And that's not by any means the best 60 foot on the planet, but on a leaf spring car, on a track that isn't radial prepped and everything else in between, it just shows you that it can be done very easily. And I want to show it so you guys can enjoy how easy it is and make your car run extremely well on the first front half, because I'm telling you, it's a lot of fun, and you have to spend a lot less money on horsepower if you can get it to move on the front half. So what I'm going to do today is show you how this will apply to any EFI system or any boost controller. They all have a boost versus time, or most of them have a boost versus time capable tuning ability. Some people will set them up like on duty cycle and stuff, but I'll show you why I like to use boost versus time. And then I simply use 2 MAC valves. You can buy them through us. You can buy them through 100 different places. And I don't use their fancy high-speed solenoid from any of these companies. I've heard not great reviews recently about a couple of the companies, high-speed ones, and they're like over double the price of this. So basically what we're working with is we have compressed air or CO2 coming in the number 1 port on this first solenoid. There's a T here, and this is what's going to go to your single wastegate or your twin wastegates, this line. So you just T it after here. And then this is just an exhaust port on your solenoid. So basically, if the boost controller wants to add pressure, it's gonna open this one, and it would go out there. If it's wanting to subtract pressure, it's gonna open this one, and it's gonna escape out there. So basically, when we put if we're trying to hit 8 pounds, it's gonna add until it hits 8 pounds or just over, and then it's gonna subtract to get down to that point. So it makes it very simple. And then we do boost versus time because everything on your printout, on your sheet, and then also on your data logger is based off of time. And boost is a number that we can all reference and understand. Now there's open loop and closed loop boost. Open loop boost is simply just telling a target number to hit at the wastegate. So it says put 8 pounds on top of the dome on the wastegate, and so that's what it's going to do. Closed loop is saying I want to make 8 pounds of boost, so it's going to add and subtract on top of the diaphragm on the wastegate to hit 8 actual pounds of boost. For all intents and purposes here, we're just going to talk about open loop boost, and we can get into closed loop at another time. Now, where you measure the pressure on top of the wastegate is on top of the wastegate. So basically, We are just monitoring the amount of pressure, whether it's CO2 or compressed air or manifold pressure for that matter, on top of the wastegate. So whatever's in that chamber is what we're referencing. Like I said, we can get into closed loop boost at a later time, but this is a very simple function. Not all boost controllers have closed loop, so we're gonna just do open loop boost today. But if you want to find this solenoid setup, we sell it with a bracket and everything. I'll post a link in the description below, and you guys can get it. It's very inexpensive. If you already have like a Holley or a Haltech or anything like that, you can just add these to it. Basically, each one of these is going to be an output because the ECU is controlling them, and then your 100 or 150 PSI pressure transducer is an input. So it's just using those two to monitor and make adjustments. So let's dive into how we set things up. I'll show you a data log from last weekend when my brother was driving a car and we were on a very marginal surface. So we were kind of just backing things down. Let's get started on how to set up a boost controller. Now, Holley, Fueltech, NLR, Hyperaktive, they're all going to have this boost versus time function built into their boost controllers. We are going to do a open loop boost controller because not all of them have a closed loop, as I mentioned before. So we're going to go ahead and do an open loop boost setup. This is Holley, but again, it doesn't matter. They all have a time and they all have a dome pressure setting. So they're going to be very comparable. It'll be an easy changeover. And by no means am I suggesting one versus the other. This is just what happens to be what we are running on the Nova at this exact time. That's not saying we won't change it in the future. If you are running Holley, I'll show you how I have it set up in here. For the wastegate type, we're going to call it a dual port, so that's dome pressure control. On the solenoid configuration, we're going to do the dual Holley. That's also the dual MAC valve. You can do the single Holley, which won't allow you to go up and down. It's a very crude way of doing things. The Holley high flow, heard tons of bad reports of those lately. I have no personal experience, but a lot of people have been struggling with them being consistent and correct. So the good old trusty MAC valve setup just seems to work really well and is half the price, so that's why I like that one. You can do a single Humphrey or a dual Humphrey valve. Again, I like the MAC valves, which Holley calls the dual Holley. So we'll leave that there. Dome pressure control only as your control method. You can do map and dome pressure, but that's closed loop. Again, that's getting off into the weeds versus what the capabilities some boost controllers have, and you don't necessarily need it. And then operating mode boost versus time. Now there's several other ways, but for drag racing, everything we do is versus time. So it's time oriented. Our data logger and then our time slip, everything's in time. So this is what we're going to compare things to, and it makes it really easy. Now you'll notice this stuff is all things you can set your safety setups. You can set all this, but this will be a different video. You can set up a boost scramble. But for this video, those settings right there, and then we're going to have a trans brake launch enable input. So when we hit the trans brake, that's what's going to control the beginning of the boost versus time when we let go of it. And then our launch target is going to be 8 PSI. Knowing that that's 8 PSI, well, that's just an arbitrary number. From what I have done in the past, most every car is going to take 7 or 8 PSI off the launch. Again, this whole video is around the concept that you have an engine that's tuned properly before you come to the track. You have a suspension that works reasonably well. You have a good tire on the vehicle, and you test the boost controller out beforehand. You want to make sure everything's operating correctly because if you don't, I can't really make this work well or easy. You'll have a timetable on the bottom here. You'll have the dome pressure on this axis of the table. We have all zeros here, so basically we're starting from scratch. Now, just to give you a little bit of a background, I've never had a car that I can't have all of the power in on basically any track by 1.4 or 1.5 seconds. And the reason why it's best to have all of your power in by 1.4 seconds is, you do not want to be applying more power after you are past the glue on the track. So if you're in South Georgia or you're in Virginia Motorsports Park or you're at Bradenton Motorsports Park, any of those when they're radial prepped, you can pretty much apply power all the way down the track, and that's how like the RVW guys do it. I've never tuned an RVW car. I don't know that I ever will, but It's a whole different scenario there versus your Friday night test and tune on a track that's not radial prepped or is not prepped well. Whether you're on slicks or radials, doesn't matter. Typically, you'll see those tracks prepped to about 100 feet. So you want to kind of put that time lapse or that time in reference to where you're at on the track. If you're applying power at 4 seconds out and you're halfway down the track, you're going to get into an area where you're shocking and changing the tire dynamics in an area where there's no glue to allow that to happen. That's just my theory. It works really well to have as much or all of your power in before you get off the glue. Because if the tire is already up on the tire and it's working, typically it's going to stay working unless it's a really bad track like somebody de-prepped it or threw water, oil, whatever. But no prep situations are a different animal. This is going to represent no preps, your general no preps where there's just not a lot of prep, as well as your typical Friday, Saturday night track where it's not perfectly prepped. And then also it will translate into a well-prepped track. For reference, a X275 or Ultra Street car, most of the guys that tune those, they'll have every ounce of power into the engine and then going down to the tires at 0.5 to 0.7 seconds. Most of them don't use hardly any traction control. I would bet most of the people watching this video have a car that makes the same or less horsepower. You know, an X275 car make 1900 horsepower to the tires, to the wheels, to the hubs, whatever you want to call it. Not a ton of people on the other side of that, and if you are, it'll still translate. But those guys are all in power on a decent prep track by 0.5 or 0.7 seconds. So that just kind of gives you a frame of reference to where they're at with things. We're going to just do 1.4 or 1.2, something like that. We know that my Nova will go down any track with power all the way applied by 1.4 seconds. So again, I'm setting my time at 0 seconds here and 10 seconds here. My car will go down a quarter mile on a slow day at a very bottom 8, and it'll go down on a fast day, mid 7, maybe faster by the end of the year. So 10 seconds gives us plenty of wiggle room. It's going to apply CO2 through that 10 seconds. After it gets to 1.4 seconds, it's going to stay the same all the way through. So at 0 seconds, which is the trans brake's enabled, we're going to want to set this at the same thing as what the trans brake's at. If you set that differently, as soon as you let go of the trans brake, it's going to have weird things happen, and it doesn't really give you a whole lot of benefit as far as tuning. So now you'll see that we have this gap between 8 and 20. Again, I'm tuning my Nova to go down any track, anytime. What we're going to want to do is create you can start with a straight line if you want. I typically do somewhat of a convex curve so that it gets more of it in early and then it just kind of flattens out towards the top, because we're trying to get as much in as early as possible while the track is glued and then slowly add the rest. When I first started doing boost control stuff, I knew nothing, absolutely nothing, and a good friend of ours, Joey Raviola, who drives a Boost 12 car, came to me one day and I had my NLR set to where I had a concave curve like that. And all that does is it makes it real smooth out here and violent after you get out of the glue. That's not what you want. You want it to go up and over, not straight across and then up at the end. It's just working against yourself. When he changed that on mine, the car instantly turned around and went faster, and I learned a lot that day. A lot of what we learn in this race car world is from somebody else's experiences, and it's good to have people like him around you, or if somebody's willing to give you some help at the track, definitely listen if you appreciate how their vehicle runs. That might be a little extreme down here in the middle, but again, we're just starting a starting point. I know this thing will go down any track tuned like this. The other thing you can do once you have that set up is change your increments. We don't want it to be that slow to take 0.6 seconds. We're going to change that to 0.3 seconds. We're going to change that to 0.4 seconds. We're going to split that 1.4 into a manageable thing that we can understand with increments that make sense. 1.1, 1.2, 1.4. You'll see I just split it down in tenths of seconds, and I know that what we have going on here, pretty much any variation to start with is going to go down just about any track. So it's going to come up. We could probably pull this up just a little bit, pull that up just a little bit, and that's going to go down pretty much any track. You always want to start soft. You're not going to get any data from spinning the tires hard. So what we will do is I'll show you now a log from Andy's last pass at the track. and we'll review that. So this is a log from Andy's last pass at Cordova Raceway on Friday night. They were running high school hard tire and they were running test and tune and trophy. So we had power pulled out, we had timing pulled out. We were just trying to make a pass. This pass went 8.0 at 172. That kind of gives you a little bit of a reference to where we're at. So I just simplified all of our data logs here. I removed all the unrelevant data, and you can actually see that this is TPS, so we know Andy had his foot floored the whole time. This is engine RPM. This is just going to show you first gear because we're only going to 1.6 seconds if you look down here. The purple is G meter. We got some work to do to figure out why that's so bumpy because it's definitely not going back and forth that much. Maybe we need to scale it differently. That was the first day out with the G meter. And then this blue is our drive shaft sensor. I guess we can turn off oil pressure over there. Well, what we did, we had, if you look down here at dome pressure, at 0 seconds into the run, we had 9 PSI on the dome pressure. So his launch would have been 9 PSI. So if you watch up here, you'll see time for the run. That's going to show you a reference time on where we're at in the run. Our first click, you see the drive shaft is starting to increase in speed. Our G meter's going up, that's great. From, what is it, 0 to, it's going up to 1G. Our time is at 0.34 seconds right here at this little hump right here. And then if you watch, it actually falls off down there and it dips. And that's because we were just being really cautious. We wanted him to get his 5 passes in at the track so he could turn in and get his license all done and complete. But you'll see that this drive shaft falls off, and at the same time, or right after, it's always a slight delay, the G meter falls off. That means that the car was taken off and then it's down. And then all the way up until about right here or right here, so we'll click that, that's 0.272 seconds in the run. So you'll want to take note of that. Also notice the engine RPM is going up, so there's nothing wrong with the engine. It just is basically down on power because we're only commanding at this point 10 PSI. So we have a very slow ramp. At almost 0.3 seconds, we've only added 1 pound. So it liked that 9 PSI off the hit, and then at 11 PSI, it starts to come back to get to life. So basically, we know between 0.034 seconds and 0.3 seconds, we need to move that boost curve up, basically to bring that wheel speed up so it just continues. This dip right here is a ton of time in your 60 foot, and it's a ton of time in your ET. You should note any 1/10 of a second in your 60 foot translates to at least 0.2 of a second in your quarter mile. Can be faster yet, especially when you really get the thing rolling. So you'll see that probably by 0.4, 0.5 seconds, this thing is doing what it needs to do, and you probably can't throw too much power at it at that point. It's just cruising right along. Again, in the name of being a little bit conservative, because I know not everybody's suspension works as well, and I know that not every track is even going to be this good, even though we didn't consider it to be a great prep track, which is fine. They have to accommodate all people. We know that 0.03 second time frame to probably 0.4, we can shift everything up, and that'll not only get rid of that dip, but once we get rid of that dip, then we can actually start shifting that whole graph upwards, so that basically you can hopefully carry that trajectory of wheel speed all the way across. If you don't have a drive shaft speed sensor, or you don't have a G meter, you can cut your screen in half, put your GoPro over here, slow it down and put like a timestamp on it, and then just compare it, and then just watch your suspension, watch your tire. It's a crude way of doing things, but I've done it before, and for a lot of cars that will get the job done. Otherwise, this blue line is our Motion Raceworks drive shaft sensor, and then there's tons of different G meter options out there in the world. So we'll go back now to our boost curve, and I'll show you how to tune things in from where we are here so that your next pass is faster. So for the sake of tuning against the graph that we had, I'm just going to raise this to 9.0. That will mimic what Andy had. And then I think, what was it at 0.4 seconds or something? It was at 10 or something, which is probably just a delay. So it probably looked something just like this. I don't think I even saved that tune up in and what we had. Basically, now what you want to do, if you're trying to actually hit those different intervals, really you're going to want to start targeting those actual intervals. So we know at 0.02 seconds, it's obviously fallen off enough to where there's always going to be a certain delay in the time. So that we're going to want to go split this maybe to like 0.1. And as you get this tuned in down low and the car starts working, everything past where you're all in at doesn't matter as much, if that makes sense. Because once you're all in and you're up on the tire and it's moving outside of a bad track, none of that stuff's that relevant. So we're going to just kind of rescale this time frame here. And we know that we were at 10.4 at 0.1. It's best if you have this scaled like lower like this before you start your first pass. That way you can really have all things be equal. But obviously we were waiting till 0.2 before to start moving at 10.4. So having this in, adding another pound at 0.02 seconds is probably going to be a pretty big change from where we were at. So I might even move this down to 10 because you got to remember we shortened this interval up. So this 10's coming in a lot sooner than it did before. You could also have gone back to where you were and just start moving it up because it's going to have to kind of draw in between that distance. But again, I probably did you a disservice by not setting up with small intervals like this to start with. If you have it set up like that, then you can make adjustments in the meantime. And this is just representative to kind of show you how I would move things up. But basically, you're just going to creep up small amounts and small numbers. As you get better and you have a better intuition of how things look, you can kind of start to guess how far and how fast you need to move these things up. But you're going to just basically start shifting that graph up sooner. And then we're going to leave, we know this thing was moving by 0.5, 0.6, so you can even move these top ones up. And so all you're going to do throughout the night is move these numbers up small amounts, and as long as drive shaft doesn't spike upwards, as in it's spinning, you can pretty much just keep moving all of these up, just nudge them up a little bit at a time. And then what you want to do is when you get to the end of a night where you have a certain track condition, take notes. Save this as whatever that night was, the humidity, power levels you were at, all that stuff. That way you can reference it later. If you have 20 of these types of tune-ups for different types of tracks, that's an amazing thing. And again, when I first started on, within 6 to 7 passes, we were going 120 60 foot on a new combo, new EFI system, new turbos, new just engine combination. We didn't have DI anymore. So we basically did exactly this. And I think when I went a 120 60 foot, we were leaving at 12 or 13 pounds and we started the day at 9. So we started shifting this up because it was just really sluggish off the line. So you can actually shift this number up as well. But before you start doing that, you want to learn how fast and how quickly you can ramp things in. Everybody has their own way of doing this, but this is a nice, smooth, clean way. And I guarantee if you build a graph like this and start at a conservative number and start chipping up, you'll have a night full of personal bests. Once you get it to leave smooth, you can start shortening the time to get to the top. So you could, make this by the end of the night, make this 0.9, so that, or you can make this 1.0. The sky is the limit. So basically you can start, if it's doing good by the time it's at 0.6 and you can keep creeping it up, then you can start shortening that gap, and that's going to improve your 60 foot drastically. It's a lot of trial and error, but again, as you get better and understand what the car is doing, your intuition will play in really well. You can get to the point where you're putting in so much power that you're going to have to start chaining down the front end and all that stuff. But that's another video. We'll cover that another time. I hope that previous boost versus time graph looks good to you. One thing I didn't cover initially is instead of this dipping, there might be a time when this spikes, your drive shaft speed spikes, and that's obviously tire spin. Also, your G meter will fall off. So if that's the case, then we're going to just move that boost versus time down. You're going to, the few in front of it, the few numbers in front of it, you're going to want to creep down and just get to a point where it'll stay planted and stick. So you can either go up if this is dipping down, or if it spikes up, then you can move your boost versus time numbers down. It's like I said, it's all trial and error, But to start with a graph like we had on the previous page is a great start, and will get you down into a low 120 60 foot with a decent suspension. And the next time out we're going to go 1 60 foot. So there's no magic, there's no crazy pill or science or anything behind it. It's just simply making a small graph. Jumping back to this one more time, sometimes when I will log in somebody's laptop, they will have a situation where it comes up like this and the graph goes flat, and then it comes up, and then it has another plateau, and up, and it has another plateau. If you think about how that will affect the tire, those shocks, your shock is stopping, and then you're going flat, and then you shock the tire by increasing again, and then it flattens out. That's not what you want. You want to gradually apply power so that the tire isn't being forced into big changes, especially as you get closer and closer to out of the glue on the track and out of the rubber that's being laid on the starting line. That's why a smooth, nice graph like this is so much better than one that goes up and down like it's a heartbeat. You definitely don't want that. Maybe there's some type of no prep situation where that works. You might find a dip in a really crappy track where you need it to go smooth there, so it's not applying power across a pothole or a dip. I've been to tracks like that, craziness. I don't know why I go to tracks like that or have in the past, but sometimes you just get there and that's what they have. But for any other reason than that, you would never want to really slow down this curve or make it flat in any spot along here, because once you get it up on the tire, it's way less likely to come off the tire. At that point, you're really only concerned with max boost or max power. If you think for some reason the car is going to come unglued at the top, that's when you're going to want to play with your max boost. And you can, of course, if you are on a track where it's really bad on the back end of the track, you can always lower this down to taper off and give you a little bit of safety so it's not putting big power down where it's real slippery out back. But for most tracks and most intents and purposes, once it gets to the top, you just leave it flat all the way across the top. So basically what I'm trying to get at with this whole thing is keep it very simple. All that matters is understanding where you're starting at, your launch target and your 0 PSI setting, where you're going to, whatever your max, whatever you're tuned for, or whatever you feel like putting through the vehicle that night, and then drawing yourself a nice convex curve. That creates a nice smooth graph. You don't need a bunch of notches along there. And then if you do that properly and understand those increments, you can go back to your data log, see in those exact increments and compare them to what the drive shaft's doing and the G meter's doing. If it slows down, if it starts to fall off, hey, there's a lot of room to grow. If you see a spike, you can conversely take power out in those exact spots. It's very simple once you break down all of the data to just a few points that you need. Again, this is assuming you have a car that has a suspension that works reasonably well, a good tire on it, and the engine's tuned properly. If that's the case, this is a very simple and easy way to tune with a boost controller. You can make small changes that make big benefits to your program. And then, like I said, if you record it properly, you can record what track you were at and take notes like, this track was very marginal, this is a boost, explain your conditions. That way, the next time you roll into a track and you're like, oh, I think I have a tune-up for a hot, greasy track when it's hot outside or whatever. Again, this doesn't matter if you're using Holley or Fueltech or NLR, any of those different boost controllers, all these same principles are gonna move over. I hope this helps you guys out. I love tuning cars when they get to this point. It's a lot of fun. And when you have the car that just flies to the 60 and flies to the 330 and then it also makes good power on the big end, it's really intimidating to your opponents, and that's also how you win races. If you guys have questions for another Tech Tip Tuesday, don't forget to drop them in the comment section below. This one came from some people asking about how we tune our cars. We went from no data to 1.20 60 foot in 7 passes. And we don't tune cars every day. We're not Jamie Miller, we're not Pete Harrell, Steve Petty, any of those guys, but it's very simple. I use this exact same methodology. There's no hidden secrets outside of that. Thanks for tuning into Tech Tip Tuesday. We will see you guys next time.